A homeless woman in the mountains is nothing more than prey. The words came from a wealthy hunter as he leveled his rifle at the woman living alone in a rotting cabin. Someone his group dismissed as trash with no one to protect her. To them, she was the perfect object for entertainment, a human hunt disguised as sport. No one noticed the half-step shift in her stance to slip out of a firing line, or the cold gaze quietly calculating lethal distances. As they laughed and spread out to surround her, they believed they were the hunters and she was the only prey in the forest. It was only when her first shot punched cleanly into the leader's shoulder that they froze, finally understanding. The homeless woman had never been prey. She was something even hunters should never awaken. Kaylin Voss was out in front of her cabin that afternoon, the axe coming down steady and sure on the logs she'd hauled in the day before. The mountain air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine sap and damp earth, and the only sounds were the thwack of blade on wood and the occasional call of a hawk overhead. Her cabin sat in a small clearing, walls weathered gray, roof patched with whatever she'd found over the years, a thin trail of smoke curling from the chimney even in daylight because she kept the stove going for warmth. She moved with quiet efficiency, lean and strong from a life of carrying her own weight, her dark hair tied back loose, face bare, eyes sharp but distant. The flannel shirt she wore was old, sleeves rolled to the elbows, jeans tucked into boots that had seen better trails. Nothing about her screamed for attention, and that's exactly how she wanted it. The group of hunters came upon her clearing without warning, their voices carrying first, then their boots crunching through the underbrush. Brant Holloway led the pack, tall and broad in his brand-new hunting jacket, rifle slung casual over one shoulder like a prop. Silas Crow was right beside him, shorter but built solid, the kind of man who'd seen rough work and wore it in his scarred hands. Merrick Dane lumbered behind, the landowner, his face red from the climb, belly pushing against his vest. 3 more followed, Jax with his twitchy energy, Royce loud and red-faced, Tate hanging back a little quieter. They stopped at the edge of the trees, taking in the sight of her, and the smirk started slow, then spread wide. Brant let out a low, mocking laugh first, pointing straight at her with the barrel of his rifle lowered but obvious. "Well, damn, boys. Look what wandered into our sights. Living like this still counts as human?" His voice carried easy, used to being heard in boardrooms and bars alike. He stepped fully into the clearing, closing the distance between them with an arrogant stride that claimed the ground beneath his boots. Without a word of warning, he brought his heavy boot down hard on the neat stack of firewood Kaylin had spent the morning arranging, sending the logs scattering into the mud. He twisted his heel into a piece of split pine, grinding it into the dirt as he watched her face for a reaction, his smile widening when she didn't flinch. "Clean it up later," he sneered, looking back at his friends for approval. "Looks like you've got nothing but time anyway, trash." Silas crossed his arms, leaning against a pine trunk, his eyes narrowing with that predator gleam. "All alone up here? What, you hiding from something, or someone finally had enough of you?" Jack snorted, kicking at the dirt, his tattooed neck stretching as he craned to see the cabin better. "Place looks like it should be condemned. Bet the rats pay her rent." Royce laughed, a harsh grating sound, and wandered over to a makeshift drying rack near the cabin wall, where bundles of wild herbs and dried berries hung in careful rows. Winter provisions that had taken Kaylin weeks to gather. With a casual, destructive swipe of his rifle barrel, he smashed the wooden frame, sending the food spilling onto the wet ground. He didn't stop there. He deliberately stomped on the berries, crushing them into a useless red paste against the soil, effectively destroying a month's worth of survival rations in seconds. "Whoops," he grunted, not looking sorry in the least. "Probably doing you a favor. This garbage looks like it would kill a goat, let alone a person. You should thank us for saving you from food poisoning." The laughter rolled out, comfortable and cruel, each man feeding off the others. Royce joined in loudest, his voice booming. "Hey, sweetheart, you got any teeth left, or did the mountain take those too?" Merrick spat to the side, adjusting his cap, his tone heavy with ownership. "This is private land, missy. You squatting here, dragging the whole area down." Brant moved in closer, invading her personal space until he was breathing the air right in front of her face, the smell of stale whiskey and expensive tobacco rolling off him. He reached out and snatched the axe from her hand, the sudden movement aggressive and sharp. She let it go without a struggle, her fingers uncurling slowly, eyes tracking the blade. Brant weighed the tool in his hand, laughing at the balance, then swung it wildly, missing her leg by mere inches and embedding the blade deep into the chopping block with a violent thud. "Careful now," he whispered, leaning in until his forehead almost touched hers, his eyes dead and cold. "Tools are for men who know how to work. You look like you'd cut your own foot off just to get a disability check. Maybe I should keep this. Keeps you from hurting yourself." Kaylin paused mid-swing, letting the axe rest in the wood, her breath even as she turned just enough to see them all. She didn't speak, just studied them for a long beat, then pulled the axe free and set the next log in place. The disregard stung them more than any comeback could have, and their voices rose to cover it. Silas pushed off the tree, walking closer, boots deliberate on the leaves. He stopped by her water barrel, the one she'd filled at dawn from the stream a half-mile down, and tilted it with his foot, letting a slow stream spill out onto the dirt. "Oops, guess you'll be thirsty tonight." The group howled, slapping thighs and shoulders. Jax grabbed a loose branch and poked at the cabin wall, flakes of old paint coming off. "This thing's one wind away from falling over. How do you even stand the smell?" Jax's eyes lit up as he spotted a small, weathered wooden box sitting on the porch rail, the only decorative thing in the entire clearing. He flipped the lid open, pulling out a folded, faded American flag and a small silver compass that had clearly seen war. "Look at this junk!" he shouted, waving the flag around like a rag. "Stole this from a veteran's grave, did you? Or maybe you looted a surplus store before you ran into the woods." He blew his nose loudly into the fabric of the flag, wiping the snot on the stars before tossing it into a puddle of mud near the stairs. "Pathetic. You people act like wrapping yourself in the flag makes you count for something. It's just dirty laundry, sweetheart." Royce stepped up next to Brant, grinning wide. "Probably sleeps with the door open so the bears can come cuddle." Tate, quieter but still in on it, tossed a small rock that bounced near her feet. "Entertain us, lady. Say something funny." Their circle tightened without them noticing, voices overlapping in that rhythm of pack cruelty, each insult landing harder to top the last. Kaylin bent down, righting the barrel, scooping what water remained with a tin cup she kept nearby, her movements unhurried, hands steady. She stacked the split wood higher, ignoring the rock, the spilled water, the laughter echoing around her. Brant leaned in, his expensive cologne cutting through the pine air. "Cat got your tongue, or you just know your place?" The mockery kept building, wave after wave, turning her silence into fuel. Kaylin finally set the axe down, wiping her hands on her jeans, and looked straight at Silas, the one closest. "You've had your fun. Move on." Her voice was low, even, no anger, just statement. The words cut through the noise like a cold wind, and for a second, the laughter faltered. Royce recovered first, barking loud. "Hear that? She thinks she's in charge." But the air had shifted, just enough for them to feel it, though the push passed quick with more jabs. Silas watched her closer now, something nagging at him about the way she held herself. Spine straight, weight balanced, not the slump of someone beaten down by life. It didn't fit the picture they had painted. Jax, still buzzing with adrenaline, lifted his rifle in a mock aim, finger nowhere near the trigger, but the gesture clear. "Bang, you're dead," he said, grinning. Kaylin's eyes flicked to the weapon, her right hand flexing once at her side, a quick, involuntary tighten before relaxing. "M4 variant, aftermarket grip," she said, quiet, almost to herself, but loud enough for Silas to catch. He blinked, then shook it off. "What? You see that on YouTube?" Brant laughed it away. "Lucky guess from a lonely loser." Kaylin turned to walk toward the cabin door, her shoulders shifting under the flannel, exposing for a moment an old, puckered scar running across the back, entry and exit, clean through muscle. Royce pointed quick. "Whoa! What's that? Bar fight gone wrong?" Jax leaned in. Or her ex finally snapped. They laughed again, but Silas stared longer at the scar, the way it sat high on the shoulder, too precise for random violence. Merrick cleared his throat, stepping forward with that landowner authority, his voice booming. "All right, party's over. This is my land, and you're gone by dawn. Pack whatever rags you got and get out." He waved a hand dismissively. Royce grabbed a canvas bag from her porch step, one holding basic tools, and chucked it hard down the slope behind the cabin, watching it tumble into brush. "Start with that?" Brant grinned wide, the idea lighting his eyes. Yeah, give her a head start. Make it a real hunt. The words spread like fire, whispers turning to plans, voices excited about turning the afternoon into something darker. Silas nodded along, though his gaze kept drifting to Kaylin's face, calm as stone. She walked to the edge, retrieved the bag without hurry, dusted it off, and slung it over her shoulder. Merrick pointed toward the deeper woods. Move, now! As she took her first steps toward the tree line, Brant raised his rifle, not aiming at her, but at the ground just inches behind her heels. He pulled the trigger, the deafening crack echoing off the valley walls as dirt and pine needles sprayed onto the back of her boots. Run! He screamed, his face twisted in a manic grin, the power rush hitting him hard. Rabbits don't walk, bitch! You better sprint before I decide to see if you can dance. The other men cheered, raising their own weapons, firing rounds into the air and into the trees around her, creating a chaotic tunnel of noise and flying bark. They wanted fear. They wanted to see her scramble and plead, but she didn't break stride, didn't flinch, just kept that steady, terrifyingly calm pace into the shadows. Kaylin glanced once more at the cabin, the place she'd kept quiet for years, then started down the trail into the trees, steps measured, not running, just walking away. Behind her, the men gathered around Merrick's map, already plotting paths, rifles loaded with clicks, convinced the game was theirs. While Kaylin disappeared into the brush, Jax and Royce kicked open the door to her cabin, intent on tossing the place for anything valuable before they burned it down. Inside, they froze. It wasn't the squalid nest of rags they expected. The floor was swept immaculate, and on a heavy workbench in the corner sat a disassembled tactical radio and a stack of topographical maps with grid coordinates marked in precise, military red grease pencil. What is this? Jax muttered, picking up a piece of the tech. This is high-end, like restricted high-end. Royce knocked it out of his hand with a scoff. She probably stole it from a downed weather balloon or a ranger station. Meth heads collect all kinds of shiny junk. Grab the batteries, smash the rest. We don't need her calling for help on a ham radio. Kaylin moved deeper into the forest, the familiar weight of the trees closing around her, sunlight filtering in patches through the canopy. She didn't look back, but her pace was deliberate, choosing ground she knew by heart. Within minutes, her footprints vanished, brushed smooth with a branch, steps placed on rocks and roots. She didn't just run, she circled. Moving through a dense thicket of ferns, she dropped to her stomach, crawling through the mud with a fluidity that belonged to a reptile, not a human. She reached the perimeter where the hunters had paused to load their magazines, watching them from 30 yards away through a screen of ivy. While they argued over who would take the first shot, she silently accessed the external pouch of Merrick's discarded backpack, which was resting against a log. With surgical precision, she removed the satellite phone and the spare ammunition clips, replacing them with heavy stones of equal weight. She sealed the bag and melted back into the undergrowth before Merrick even turned around to pick it up, leaving them severed from the outside world without them realizing the line had been cut. The hunters followed at first, loud and confident, but soon the trail went cold. Silas knelt, running fingers over dirt that showed nothing. This ain't normal. A sharp snap rang out, and Tate screamed, leg caught in a simple but brutal snare, bone cracking audible as he hit the ground. Royce rushed over, cursing, while radios crackled with sudden static, voices cutting in and out. Brant smacked his handset. Damn signal! Jax looked around wild. She's messing with us. Silas stood slow, scanning ridges. No, she's leading us. The laughter was gone now, replaced by tight jaws and quick breaths. Sudden static screamed across their localized radio channels, a high-pitched rhythmic screeching that forced them to rip their earpieces out in agony. Then, Kaylin's voice cut through the noise, broadcasting not from a distance, but seemingly from everywhere at once, hijacking their own frequency. Check your chambers, gentlemen. The voice was calm, metallic, filtered through superior encryption. Brant frantically racked the slide of his rifle, only to find the mechanism jammed solid with a precise mixture of pine resin and grit, sabotage that had happened minutes ago when he'd set the weapon down to urinate, completely unaware she had been 3 feet away in the brush. My God, Brant whispered, staring at his useless weapon. She was right beside me. They pressed on anyway, pride pushing harder than sense. Brant took point, chin high. Just tricks. Keep eyes open. Random shots cracked into the brush, meant to flush her out. Royce yelled loudest, "Come out, you freak! Game's over!" Merrick huffed behind, sweat soaking his collar. "Anything moves, shoot it. No loose ends." They believed she was panicking somewhere, hiding, terrified of the noise and numbers. Suddenly, the forest floor to their left erupted in a blinding flash of white light and thick, acrid smoke. It wasn't a lethal explosion, but a military-grade distraction charge made from magnesium and flash powder. The horses they hadn't brought spooked in spirit, but the men panicked, firing blindly into the smoke. In the confusion, Jax felt a sudden, brutal yank on his vest. He was dragged backward into the darkness of a ravine, his scream cut short by a sleeper hold applied with hydraulic pressure. By the time the smoke cleared, Jax was gone, his rifle hanging from a branch 10 feet in the air, swinging like a pendulum, a ghost message that they were being dismantled one by one. Then a single shot rang, different, sharper, from impossible distance. Brant staggered forward, hand clamping his shoulder as blood seeped between fingers. He dropped to his knees, face draining color. "Shot! I'm shot!" Silas dove for cover, pulling others down, heart hammering. "That's no hunting rifle. Sniper round." A voice carried faint through the trees, amplified just enough. "Withdraw." Jax whimpered, having crawled back to the group, pale and shaking, checking himself for holes. The group huddled, eyes wide. Brant gritted teeth, waving them on with his good arm. "Not stopping now! Find her!" 2 more shots followed, precise, knocking rifles from hands without touching flesh. Royce's weapon spun away, stock splintered. Tate, dragging his broken leg, panicked and fired wild, grazing Jax's arm. Screams mixed with curses, men scattering, trust shattered. Merrick turned and bolted back toward camp, leaving them without a word. Merrick didn't make it far. He scrambled over a ridge, lungs burning, only to find his path blocked by a massive felled oak tree that hadn't been there on the hike up. As he turned to scramble around it, a tripwire snapped tight around his ankle, hoisting him 10 feet into the air. He swung there, upside down, red-faced and screaming, his pockets emptying, keys, wallet, phone, raining down onto the forest floor. Kalen stepped out from behind a birch tree, calmly collected the keys to his truck and his wallet, checked the ID, and placed them into her pocket. She didn't say a word to the screaming man, just tapped the tree trunk twice as if to say, "Stay put," and faded back into the mist, leaving the landowner dangling like a caught fish on his own property. The pack broke apart, each running blind. Kalen appeared then on the high ridge above, visible against the sky, old coat flapping, but now holding a long, matte black sniper rifle steady at her side. She didn't raise it, just stood. Silas peeked from behind rock, recognition hitting hard. He looked closer at the way she stood, not just the stance, but the specific way her left hand rested near the bolt, a distinct, ready rest position taught only at the chaotic warfare school in Dam Neck. He'd seen that stance once before in a blurred classified briefing video from a failed extraction in Yemen. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the gut, draining the blood from his face. "The ghost of Kandahar," he breathed, the myth suddenly standing right in front of him, breathing mountain air. She spoke down, voice clear. "Black Hawk 7. His old call sign, buried deep in classified files. Silas's hands came up slow, knees buckling until he knelt. "Shadow 9? My God." The others looked between them, confusion turning to raw fear as understanding sank in. Brant spat blood. "What the hell does that mean?" Silas whispered hoarse. "She's SEAL. Tier 1. Supposed to be dead." Brant snarled up at her, pain-fueling rage. "So you're some washed-up soldier freak, hiding like a rat." Royce joined in desperate. "Military threw you away, didn't they? Broken toy?" Jax clutched his arm. "We didn't know, okay? We didn't know." Their words came frantic now, last weapons of the cornered, trying to wound where bullets couldn't reach. Kalen stood silent, gaze cold and unmoved, rifle resting easy. The low thrum of rotors grew, then a black helicopter crested the ridge. No markings, military clean. Ropes dropped fast, and operators in full kit slid down, boots hitting ground solid. The commander landed last, snapped a crisp salute to Kalen. "Ma'am, perimeter secured, Guardian protocol complete." She nodded once, handing over the rifle without ceremony. Brant stared from the ground, blood pooling. "Guardian?" The commander glanced down cold. "This sector's classified federal preserve. She's the assigned protector." Brant, delirious with pain and entitlement, tried one last desperate play. He reached into his bloody jacket with his good hand, pulling out a platinum credit card and a thick money clip, throwing them toward the commander's boots. "I can pay!" he shrieked, eyes wide and manic. "Whatever the fine is, I'll double it. My father is Senator Holloway. You touch me, and I'll bury you in lawsuits so deep you'll never see sunlight. Make her stop. She's crazy." The commander didn't even look at the money. He stepped directly on the platinum card, snapping it in half with the heel of his combat boot, and signaled his men. "Gag him. I'm tired of his voice." Cuffs clicked on wrists, operators moving efficient. The hunters were hauled up, protests dying quick against reality. As the operators dragged them toward the hoist, the team leader stopped in front of Kalen, unstrapping a hard case from his back. He opened it to reveal the stolen tech Royce had smashed earlier. Only this was brand new, upgraded gear. "Logistics sent these, ma'am. Said the old units were due for a cycle." And he hesitated, then pulled out a folded, crisp American flag, sealed in plastic. "We found the one they desecrated in the mud. The general sends his personal regards and this replacement. He said no one touches your colors." Kalen took the flag with a reverence that made the hunters look away in shame, tucking it gently into her jacket. In the weeks that followed, the fallout came quiet, but relentless. Brant's name hit headlines, major contracts canceled, investors fleeing once the trespass and assault charges surfaced. Silas's old mercenary warrants resurfaced like ghosts, dragging him back to courts he'd dodged for years. Merrick lost the land outright. Federal seizure for years of illegal guiding, leaving him bankrupt and shunned. Royce's sponsorships evaporated overnight. Brands cutting ties after leaked photos spread online. Jax and Tate faded from their circles, jobs gone, doors closed wherever they turned. No grand revenge scenes, just consequences rolling out natural, the truth finally catching up. But for Merrick, the end was even more absolute. He sat in a sterile interrogation room, watching a live stream of his estate being auctioned off by the government to pay for the environmental damages he had caused. The gavel fell, selling his legacy for pennies on the dollar to a conservation trust. The agent across the table slid a piece of paper forward, a foreclosure notice on his city penthouse, triggered by the freezing of his assets under the Patriot Act statutes regarding interference with federal military operations. He wasn't just broke, he was erased. He put his head in his hands and wept, the sound echoing off the cold concrete walls. Kalen walked back down the ridge as the chopper lifted away, steps the same as always, back toward the cabin that was never just a hideout. She didn't glance at the men being loaded aboard, didn't need to. The forest settled quiet again around her. She stopped at the edge of the clearing, where the smashed drying rack and the boot prints still scarred the earth. Slowly, methodically, she began to clean. She righted the water barrel, stacked the scattered wood, and swept the mud from the porch. It wasn't just cleaning, it was a reclamation. With every sweep of the broom, she erased their presence, removing the taint of their cruelty from her sanctuary. When she was finished, she took the new flag out of her jacket, unfolded it with sharp, practiced movements, and hung it on the wall, not as a decoration, but as a boundary marker. The prey was gone, the guardian remained. That moment when the world finally sees who you've always been, it's quiet, but it changes everything. You carried yourself through the worst of it, head up, just like she did. Nobody can ever take that strength from you. You're not alone in those memories. You've already won the parts that matter. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and, finally, healing.